Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing the Rugrats movie, which released in theaters back on November 20th, 1998, so almost 20 years ago to the day, which is absolutely crazy to me because I remember so vividly seeing this movie in theaters, and I remember the hype for this movie was such a big deal. The anticipation leading up to it, so much excitement because we were getting a new Rugrat. Tommy was going to have a new little brother. And I remember, all the marketing for this movie, and part of that, there was a novel that had come out before the movie itself was released. And so that, I remember, it's completely spoiled the film. It was the plot of the film in prose, just as a novel. And so, before seeing it, we knew going into it that Tommy was in fact having a little brother, because in the movie they make it seem like, he's having a sister. But that didn't matter, knowing that it was going to be a boy. It didn't spoil it by any means. It actually made it more exciting. It was kind of like, we're in the know. We know Tommy's actually having a little baby brother. And when we went to go see the movie, before they played the movie, they showed a short for the Nicktoon cat dog. And I remember being so confused, like, this isn't Rugrats, why are they showing us Cat Dog? And it was obviously a marketing stunt to kind of promote one of their newest Nicktoons, because Cat Dog had come out earlier that year. It was April 1998 when the first episode aired on Nickelodeon. And that short, it was Dog playing fetch, but Cat was trying to win a contest. But Dog just wanted to play fetch with his tennis ball, and then Winslow throws the ball, and then they just go on this crazy chase with Dog just trying to catch the ball, and they just end up in all these weird areas, weird spaces. And it was about 7 minutes or so maybe. But watching it, I was like, I don't want to watch this, I want to watch Rugrats, I want to see the Rugrats movie. But then they ended up putting that short into an episode of the show. And I'm only bringing this up because this was part of the experience of seeing the Rugrats movie, that short had played before the movie itself. The other thing about this movie, before I get into the plot, is that I had actually danced to one of the songs from the soundtrack. And the song is... I actually still own the soundtrack, by the way. I could just go ahead and pluck it right out of my extremely dated CD collection, because does anyone buy CDs anymore? I don't know. But regardless, I still own that soundtrack, and I may or may not have listened to it a couple times to get myself pumped for this episode. But anyway, so the song I danced to back when I used to take dance lessons in my jazz class, we danced to the song Take Me There by Blackstreet and Maya, the one that it opens kind of with a hip-hop version of the Rugrats theme song. And I wish I could remember the routine itself. All I really remember about it is that part where they say, let's make a wish, close your eyes and count to 5, and then we close our eyes and then we hold out our hands with 5 fingers up. And the other thing I remember too is our costumes, because I still have a picture on my dresser. We were dressed as Angelica Pickles, except I remember I was kind of upset because it wasn't true to Angelica, because as you all know, obviously Angelica wears a purple dress, but our costumes were blue, and we had these white shirts with blue polka dots and these blue sequin dresses. And then we wore our hair in pigtails, true to form for Angelica, but then we also had visors for some reason. These blue visors with a yellow flower on them. So it was, I guess, our own unique version of Angelica's signature outfit. Not exactly true to the real Angelica. See, I'm very adamant about my being true to Rugrats because I absolutely adore Rugrats. Rugrats is my all-time favorite childhood cartoon. It just has such a special place in my heart. It was my favorite show growing up. I still enjoy it now when I revisit it every now and then, watching an episode here and there. It's a wonderful show. And so for dancing, we danced to that song. It was so much fun. So the girls, we were Angelica Pickles, and there were maybe 2 boys or so in our class. They were Tommy Pickles, of course. So it was very cute. So we had to channel Angelica. We had to one point we had to stick our tongues out and act all silly, channeling that sassy nature of Angelica Pickles. And so let's get into the plot of the Rugrats movie. It opens with the opening credits, which I absolutely love that theme song composed by Mark Mothersbaugh. Every time it came on TV, we'd shout, "Rugrats!" and go running, ready to watch Rugrats. See, that's why, before I get into this again, why I decided to just focus on the movie first, and I'll talk about Rugrats at another time, because I just have so much to say about Rugrats, and I figured if I talk about the show, I can't also talk about everything associated with it, because there's just so much Rugrats content. It was, in fact, the longest running Nicktoon until some Nicktoon came along called Spring Boob Squirepin. Oh, no, wait, sorry. SpongeBob SquarePants? Yeah. Until that show came along. But before that, Rugrats was the huge Nickelodeon hit. And rightfully so. I absolutely love Rugrats. As you can tell by how much I'm gushing already. So, as I was saying, it opens with the credits, and it gets bigger and bigger, and then Tommy squirts his bottle, and it just takes up the whole screen, and we see the Rugrats movie, which is a great intro, because it's so exciting. It's taking the babies we know and love from TV and putting them on the big screen. And so the opening is an homage to Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and of course the babies with their mispronunciations. Tommy calls him Okie Dokie Jones. And I had forgotten that Chucky's doing a voiceover at the beginning and the ending of the movie. And Chucky says, he introduces everyone, he says, "That's Tommy Pickles. He's the bravest baby I ever knowed." So sweet. Tommy and Chucky's friendship is so pure and so heartwarming. And then Chucky says, "And that's Phil and Lil. Well, they like worms." Yep, that sums them up. And then Chucky says, "And I'm Chucky. I'm not so brave, but that's okay, 'cause I got Tommy and he's my bestest friend." So then they're trying to get this gold statue that turned out to be a hot fudge sundae with a banana, and then they're running away from a boulder, and then that turns into Tommy's mom's Dee Dee, her pregnant belly, and they smack into the glass, so they're back to reality, smacking into reality, because of course one of the amazing things about Rugrats was the way they would seamlessly transition between the baby's imagination and the real world things going on of what's actually happening, capturing that amazing wonder of a child's imagination. So then when they hit the glass, Chucky just says, "We thought the fun times would last forever, but we was wrong." And so it turns out they are at Dee Dee's baby shower in Tommy's backyard. And everybody's there. You got Aunt Miriam, who's placing bets on how much people think the baby will weigh. And of course, Dee Dee's parents, who they're not in the show that much, but they're awesome too, because obviously Grandpa Lou, Stu's father, lives with them, and we love Grandpa, but Dee Dee's parents are awesome too, Grandpa Boris, and I am blanking on Dee Dee's mom's name, oh man, but Grandpa Boris, so he gives them some chocolate coins. Oh, Minka, that's it, I remembered. Minka is her mom's name, and voiced by the same woman, by the way. Minka and Dee Dee's mom and Dee Dee voiced by the same woman. But so Boris gives the babies chocolate coins. While all the happy stuff is going on, we see Drew and Stu fighting with each other as they always do, because brothers butting heads, what are you gonna do? But Stu's excited about his latest invention, because he's a children's toy maker. What a cool profession. But he's not exactly, his toys aren't exactly hits or anything, but he's adamant about this one. It's the Reptar wagon. And then while that's going on, Angelica is basically raiding the party. She dumps cookies onto the bed and she's telling Tommy not to get too excited about the new baby. She says, when the new baby gets here, she's going to get all the toys and the love and the attention. And then she says, Tommy says that's not going to happen, and Angelica says that her dad will say, look, Dee, there's that bald kid again. And she says, that's what Spike said when you was born, back when his name was Paul. Then they put him out in the rain and he turned into a dog. Angelica with her web of lies, my goodness, the crazy things that she tells the babies just for her kind of her own amusement and because she is that bully character. But then, so we get our first, this movie is a musical, which didn't kind of really register in my head as a kid. In other words, I didn't think of it as a musical. It just happens to be a movie with songs in it, you know what I mean? But, so the first song is A Baby is a Gift from a Bob, and Susie's singing, but of course Angelica, she can't have Susie hogging the spotlight, so she has to butt in. And so we have Susie, the virtuous one, singing about all the great things about having a baby, and Angelica talking about all the bad things about a baby. How Angelica says, oh God, I'm not going to sing, guys. I'm not going to sing. I can't. But that song, actually, so if you listen to the soundtrack, the full version of that song is really funny because at one point just says, a baby is just plain awful. Like, my goodness. So Angelica being the immoral one, Susie being the kind of like the angel versus devil type thing, Susie being the virtuous one, Angelica being this wicked one. But, I mean, there's truth to what Angelica says too about all the not so great stuff about newborns. But anyway, so the song leads into Dee Dee going into labor. Could be because Angelica just screams a baby is not, and then Dee Dee goes into labor. And so when they get to the maternity ward, one of those jokes that you don't pick up on as a kid, and it's just kind of subtle, but it's funny, they have a board as if it's in an airport of due, arrived, delayed, so that's cute. And then, so they put the babies in the playpen, but those babies, of course, always escape. One of the things that the show is remembered for, how the babies just easily escape because the parents conveniently are never watching, as they should be. So the grandparents are supposed to be watching them, Grandpa Lou and Grandpa Boris, but they're busy playing cards. So the babies escape and they think that maybe they could buy a baby for Tommy's mom. So they think we got to go to the baby store. So then they end up in the nursery with all these newborn babies. And then those babies sing a song called This World is Something New to Me. And I remember as a kid, I didn't like that song because I didn't like that the babies sounded like adults. And the reason for that, though, is because it's just a bunch of famous singers as these babies, which is interesting. But they just complain and everything, and there's jokes again in the song that you definitely just go over your head as a kid. Like a circumcision joke, for example. But then, after that song, then we have the glorious, momentous moment. We see through time and space. We see fish, dinosaurs, monkeys, planets. And it is a huge deal. A new Rugrat baby is born. And Stu just says, Deed, she's so beautiful. She's a boy. And we see little baby Dill. And they were going to name the baby Trixie after Stu's mother, but then they have to come up with a new name for this baby boy, and so Dee Dee suggests Dylan, and Stu says, Dylan Prescott Pickles, and the nurse says, Dill Pickles, and a nice ring to it, Dill Pickles. So there you go, we have little baby Dill. And then just a cute little moment when they bring the babies in and Tommy passes by Susie's mom who delivered the baby, Dr. Carmichael. Susie. Tommy just takes out his gold gold chocolate coin and he hands it to Susie's mom. Like, here you go. This is a good one. We'll buy this baby. So cute. Or it's like, here's a tip. It's just so adorable. And then it's a nice moment when Dee Dee introduces Tommy to his new baby brother, Dill. But then Dill just grabs Tommy's nose. Tommy starts crying and Dill starts crying. So that didn't take long. And then it flash forwards to 4 weeks later. And poor Dee Dee's passed out at the kitchen sink. And Dill just keeps crying and crying. And Lil just says at one point, maybe he's broked. And Tommy says, he's not broked. He's just a little loud. And then we get introduced to this other plot point in the movie, which is kind of... It's silly for Rugrats. It's not necessarily in tone with the series. At this point, I should mention, too, though, that... So this movie came out in 1998. That was when Rugrats was in its second run. The original run for Rugrats was when Paul Germain was the showrunner. It was the original 65 episodes of Rugrats that when they were in production and ended it was about 1990 to 1993, around that time. And then it had ended, but then Nickelodeon had ordered more episodes a couple years later. So then Rugrats resumed. It was back on the air in 97 with new episodes. I remember that, yeah. So this, at this point, it was different writers from the original run of Rugrats. And the reason I bring that up is because this is kind of a sillier thing that... Also because it's a movie and you got to add new elements to it. So we're introduced to the Banana Brothers Monkey Circus. And then that train ends up getting derailed, but the monkeys take over the train. But before that happens, so Angelica's watching TV and then an ad for the Banana Brothers Monkey Circus comes on. And Angelica screams, "Grandpa, can we go to the circus?" And a goat just rams into Grandpa. Because they have a goat, by the way, now. Because that was Dee Dee's parents' gift to her. A goat, so they could have fresh goat's milk for the baby. So they just have a goat in the house. But then the goat rams into Grandpa's chair. And Grandpa says, it's enough of a circus around here already. So then we meet Igor and Sergey, who are running this circus, and then there's just a funny part where they're arguing about who's going to stay with the train and watch the monkeys so then they can get coffee. And then one of them says, "Monkey watch you, I get coffee." And then it cuts to both of them just sitting, enjoying coffee. And then the monkeys take over the train. But then it's another sleepless night for poor Dee Dee and Stu. And Dee Dee's reading Tommy a story, but then Stu comes in with Dill, who's still crying, and Stu starts crying, and then Dee Dee takes out a binky and puts it in Stu's mouth to shut him up. That's cute. And then they sing, Dee Dee and Stu sing Dill a lullaby, the Dillaby song, and they're just making it up on the spot. And Dee Dee and Stu, by the way, they're a great relationship. Solid relationship goals, I'd say. But anyway, so it's sad because as they're singing, because they're exhausted, they're with this newborn, this infant, and they're doing the best they can, and they're trying to take care of the Dill's needs, but then they are inadvertently ignoring Tommy as they're trying to put Dill to sleep as they're singing him this little lullaby. And poor Tommy, he's holding up his storybook, and at one point Stu, he's just missing a slipper, and Tommy's holding up the slipper, but they just aren't paying attention to Tommy because they're trying to put Dill to sleep, and then he finally goes to sleep, and then they just walk out, finally able to get some sleep themselves. And then poor little Tommy, so tragic, he ends up in the closet, sitting there, snuggling Stu's slipper, and still in the tune to the song. Tommy says, "Please stop, don't you see, I want Mom and Dad for me." So sad. So poor Tommy's feeling neglected. His worst fear is that Angelica was taunting him about earlier, that he's going to be ignored. it's starting to become a reality for him from his perspective. And then it's also just a sad moment. You see poor Spike out in the rain, howling. Poor Spike. But then in the next scene, the babies are playing in the crate. And Grandpa says, oh, you gotta get out of there, kids, because you don't want to get shipped to Japan. And then Dill is cuddling with a teddy bear, and Tommy wants to hold the teddy bear. And Lil explains to him that that's not how you take things from a brother. And so she demonstrates with Phil. And then they go back and forth. That's my Reptar. Is not Lillian. Is to Philip. I always loved whenever they fought with each other, which was quite often, because they're twins and they're similar in a lot of ways, but they butt heads all the time, that they use each other's full first names. It was a cute touch with that. But then, so Tommy decides to take a page out of their book and just go ahead and try to grab the teddy bear from Dill. And Phil's impressed when Tommy's trying to wrestle the bear out of Dill's hands, and Phil just says, he learns fast. So then Stu comes to break up the fight, and Stu says, Dill, what say we give Tommy a little turn with the bear? But it doesn't work out. Dill ends up crying his head off, and then poor Tommy starts crying. It genuinely, pains me when Tommy cries. I don't know why. Tommy's my favorite, I have to say. Tommy's pretty much, honestly, my all-time favorite cartoon character from childhood, because he's a brave leader. He's someone you can look up to, even though he is just a baby. He's this moral compass, very strong character. And I admire a lot the fact that he's this leader for the group that they can look up to. But then we get a nice scene with Stu and Tommy. Even though the original showrunner Paul Germain has actually criticized this scene in particular, because he said that Stu would never talk to Tommy in the way that he does in this scene. Which I understand that, but at the same point, since this is a movie, things are heightened, and I think it makes sense for something like that where you take, especially when it's a movie based on a show, where you take things from the show and you can kind of do something else that you wouldn't normally do in the series. So it works to me, in my opinion. But Stu explains to Tommy that now he's got responsibilities. And he says that he knows little brothers can be tough, but that's why big brothers have to have faith. And he says he trusts that he'll be by Dill's side, and that he'll be a swell big brother. And he says he wanted to give this to him when he was older, but he thinks now is the right time. So he gives him a pocket watch, and that it has a picture of Tommy in it, and now a picture of baby Dill. So Tommy accepts this, and he thinks to himself, sponsitility. Because, with their mispronunciations, but it's adorable. And then as that's going on, Phil and Lil get this idea to take Dill back to the Hopsicle and get Tommy's monies back. So they want a refund on Dill. They think Dill's this annoying little kid, he's gotta go. But when Tommy walks out, he's holding his little pocket watch, his sponsitility, and he's looking at the picture of him and Dill. And he's not keen on this idea. So he says, my mommy and daddy want to keep him, which is adorable. But then at that point, Angelica comes out and Dill takes Cynthia. She tries to get Cynthia back, but then her show comes back on, her show Shirley Lock Holmes that she's watching, so she runs back in distracted. And before that, she kicks the Reptar wagon and she says, you want to ride in a wagon? I'll give you a ride to outside space. She kicks it. She runs back in to go watch her show. And this jump starts the real, true adventure of this movie. They're rolling out the door, all the babies, in that Reptar wagon. We see Grandpa Lou sitting there in the rocking chair, asleep as he always is. And then it's a decision-making moment for Chucky. He stands there as the wagon is rolling away, and he just says, just walk away, Chucky. Walk away. Oh, wait for me. And he runs out after them. So he could have stayed behind on the whole adventure, but He's got to go with the rest of the babies, with his friends. And so this part of the movie was one of the most exciting parts watching it in that movie theater. The Reptar wagon is swerving down the road, nearly runs over an old lady, and it's just this crazy insanity where it's escalating more and more. And then they end up in a mattress factory at one point, and Chucky says, I don't know whether to throw up or throw down. And then there's one point after Stu realizes the kids are gone, and he's driving like a maniac down the road, and he's screaming at Pop, saying, how could you have lost the kids? How could you have been asleep when you were supposed to be watching the kids? And we just see Pop asleep again. And then Stu is screaming, and he says, we'll never find the babies with this jerk in front of us. And he's, of course, looking away and doesn't see that the babies are, in fact, right in front of him, jumping around inside that mattress truck. But then while that's going on, Angelica realizes that Cynthia is gone. And she walks out saying, very funny, babies, bring back Cynthia. And then she stops and she looks down and sees Cynthia's shoe. And she just screams, Cynthia! Because that is it's a nice character trait about Angelica, her absolute unconditional love for Cynthia. That is something really relatable for children, having that, we all had that one toy that we loved more than any other toy, our favorite toy, whether it was a stuffed animal, a doll, what have you. So that is really sweet. And fun fact, the person who came up with Cynthia is none other than Craig Bartlett, the creator of Hey Arnold, which is really cool. But then Dee Dee comes home because she had a day to herself. She was at the spa, and then she comes home with groceries. And before that, Stu and Pop were looking for the kids. At one point, Pop opens up the cookie jar and just says, Angelica? But then Dee Dee asks them what's going on, and Lou says, Einstein here lost the kids. Stu says, I lost the kids? And Pop says, see? Terrible. But then the mattress veers off the road. The mattress truck veers off the road, and the babies end up lost in the forest. And Chucky just says, this place is bigger than the park and the backyard all put together. So the babies realize that they're lost, but Tommy assures them that it's okay because he's got his responsibility. And they ask what that is, and he says it's like what Okie Dokie Jones uses when he wants to get home. And Phil says, I thought that was called a crumpus. But Tommy opens it up, and we see that it's noon. This is actually something I didn't, as a kid, for some reason I thought they were lost for days, like a solid 2 days. But in actuality, they're lost for a few hours, which is still obviously frightening, but for some reason I thought it was a couple days when I was a kid. Don't know why. Anyway, Angelica decides she needs to go after the babies to try to find Cynthia, and she takes Spike with her, and she just says, they took Cynthia, Spike. Come on, you're gonna be my butt hound. We gotta search every doghouse, playhouse, treehouse, and dollhouse. I want those fugitives back in custody. And so, when they realize the babies are gone, all of a sudden there's this swarm of media. There's relentless media people and news anchors and everyone. And the most relentless of all is this guy who flies down from a helicopter. And he's, of course, wanting to incite anger in... He incites anger in Drew by saying, how does it feel to know that your brother lost your only daughter? And then Drew just attacks poor Stu. And he's... Of course, they're just these malicious media folks who want their ratings. They don't care at all. And then this news anchor guy, his name is Rex Pester, he says, and there you have it. 2 sour pickles and young Tammy, baby Dale, the twins Bill and Jill, little Chunky, and poor Amelia, all vanished without a trace. Horrendous. But then the babies decide that they need to go, in order to get home, they need to find the lizard. As in the wizard as an homage to The Wizard of Oz. But that's what they decide that they need to do, so they can ask for a wish so they can go home. And Tommy says, maybe a lizard lives there, a big guy with a pointy hat that grants wishes. We could tell him we want to go home, and then everything will be back to Norman. And Phil says, thank Bob. And Lil says, thank you, Bob. So then Tommy trips, and they're confused, and it turns out to be wolf footprints. And Phil says, a wolf made them. And Tommy says, oh yeah, like in the story. And he howls, and it's an actual wolf howl. And Phil says, that was pretty good. And Tommy says, I didn't do anything. So then they run into the wagon because actual danger, they could get eaten by a wolf. But Chucky says, I don't know what he looks like. And Phil says, teeth and fur and teeth. And then we meet these two park rangers, Margaret and Frank, the veteran, the so-called veteran, but he just freaks out. He's really a baby, and Margaret is the one who steps in, but at first she's excited because she thinks she saw a dragon, which is actually, of course, the Reptar wagon, but he thinks she's crazy until he actually sees it for himself, and he loses it. Because the babies end up in the river, and thanks to Dill, because he's playing around with the lever, but they fall in and the Aqua Reptar engages, so it's ironic because usually Stu's inventions don't work, but this one works absolutely perfectly, and thank goodness for these babies that they're able to survive with this Reptar wagon and all of its utilities. And then we get the song Yo Ho Ho and a Bottle of Yum, a parody of Yo Ho Ho and a Bottle of Rum, and they're singing about the pirate's life, the babies. But then, after they sing, then poor Dill almost goes overboard, and poor Chucky does go overboard, and he's screaming for Tommy to help him, but then he just stands up and he's okay. But that's one of the instances where Chucky's basically feeling left out because Tommy's always looking after Dill, and he feels like he's being replaced. A sort of version of sibling rivalry, but really it's because that's his best friend. Because earlier Dill threw up on Chucky, and then so all these things keep happening, and Chucky keeps feeling more and more pushed out, and that Dill is this selfish little baby and Tommy keeps sticking up for him because it's his brother, but Phil and Lil are adamant that they don't like Dill, and Chucky's kind of caught in the middle, but he's starting to feel more and more that Tommy doesn't care about him as much because he's looking after baby Dill. Because Tommy keeps standing up for Dill, saying he's just a baby. But then they're heading towards the waterfall, and Dill keeps pulling at the lever, making things worse for them because he's just a little baby, he doesn't know. But then they almost go into the waterfall, but then luckily they go forward again, and then they crash and back onto ground. And so then Tommy's leading them in circles. And at that point, when he opens up the pocket watch, his spontatility, we see that it's almost 4 o'clock. It says 3:40. So it's already been a few hours by now. And so then they're walking around in circles, literally walking around the same tree. And they think, oh, they see feet prints, but it's their own footprints. And then Lil just says, I think your responsibility is broke, just like your brother. So they're fighting. And then Chucky wanders off, and then he screams, seeing a clown, because Chucky's terrified of clowns, among many other things. But it is the train that crashed with the monkeys, and they all pop out. And then we get the Witch Doctor's song, and that's an old song. It's from, I believe, 1958. But when you were a kid, I mean, I didn't know that was an old song, obviously, but these are things you learn years and years later. So that's a fun one, too. There's all these shenanigans with the monkeys. At one point, the monkeys jump down, they float down with an umbrella, and then Phil and Lil try to do that, but theirs is just a broken umbrella with just the prongs, and they just go jumping down to the ground really quickly. And then Dill's complaining because he's hungry, but Tommy just wants to play with the monkeys, But then he goes over to feed Dill because Tommy's a good big brother. He knows he has to take care of his little brother. He opens up the jar. And of course it's banana food, of course. But then the monkeys get a whiff. They want to eat it. And then Dill's too excited. He takes the jar. It spills on him and the monkeys are licking the food off of him. But then Chucky's trying to help, saying, hey, leave him alone. He's not a nanner. Guys, help the monkeys. They're trying to take Tommy's brother. And it's just a hilarious moment when they're standing there and Phil just goes, so? Phil and Lil, I have to say, I do like Phil and Lil. They're just not my favorites. Tommy's my favorite, as I said, and then I love Chucky. He's my second favorite character. Phil and Lil are those, always that comic relief, but they're MVPs in this movie. They're awesome. I forgot how hilarious they are in this movie in particular. But Tommy had run off because he wanted to get the diaper bag back, and so then the monkeys end up taking Dill because Phil and Lil were trying to hold Dill and Chucky screams to let go, so they say okay, they let go, and then the monkeys run off with baby Dill. And then at that point Chucky says it can't get any worser then, and he steps on his glasses and he says this. Poor Chucky. And so with the adults, they're trying to find the kids, and then at one point Drew says, you and your stupid inventions, and Stu has this light bulb moment saying, that's it. And so he takes down this other invention. It's kind of sort of an airplane type vehicle. He calls it a dactar. So it's like a pterodactyl vehicle that can fly. And then he's getting ready to use that, and Chaz is standing there, and by Grandpa Lou, by Pop, and Lou asks if he's ready, and Chaz says no, and Lou says go. Chaz says no, and Lou says alrighty then, so they just take off, and Stu just kind of gets caught, but he's sort of flying it even as this Dactar device is breaking apart. But then Tommy comes back with his diaper bag, and Lil throws one of the banana food jars under the seat of the Reptar wagon, and Tommy pulls away the blanket and he just sees a monkey, and his little baby brain, he just thinks, my brother turned into a monkey? And then he says he has to tell the lizard to wish him back into he says, I'll get the lizard to wish him back into a people. But then Lil confesses that isn't his brother. And so basically Phil and Lil, that's when they have had enough of Tommy standing up for Dill. And Phil says, we're going to find that lizard, Tommy. You can find your brother by yourself. And Tommy asks Chucky if he'll help him. But Chucky just, because he's caught in the middle, he ends up just saying, sorry, Tommy. And then Tommy, getting all sad, he says, but you're my bestest friend. And then that's when Chucky says, well, you didn't help me when I almost went overboard, or when the monkeys took his glasses, or all the things that happened, or when he fell and he said, and you didn't even care about my boo-boo. And Lil says, face it, Tommy, you don't have a bestest friends anymore. All you gots is a brother. And so basically Tommy loses his friends, and he decides, well, he needs to go after his brother himself. So he takes the diaper bag and he walks away, and the monkey jumps out, and Chucky, Phil, and Lil just stand there as it starts raining. And so then as that's happening, back to Angelica, we get another song. Angelica singing One Way or Another. Again, a parody. Didn't realize it was a song until years later. The song One Way or Another by Blondie. But in Angelica's version, she's singing about Cynthia, how she needs to see Cynthia and get her back. And then there's one point after she sings that when she gets caught in Spike's dog leash and he goes running and she gets dragged on with her in her roller skates. And so in this next scene, one of the more emotional parts of this movie, a part that I'll admit makes me teary-eyed, after Dill drinks, Tommy finds Dill, it scares the monkeys away. Dill drinks Tommy gives him a bottle, and Dill drinks the whole bottle, and Tommy finally has a moment where he's had it. He tries to give Dill the blanket, but Dill takes the entire blanket for himself. And then they fight and they rips. And so then Tommy has had enough, and because he's tired of Dill being selfish. Because that's the things about infants. They're little babies who just cry and just want food, want to be changed, want attention. That's all they know. We need to learn kindness. But Tommy says, "You think it's funny?" Because Dill's laughing. And he says, "Phil and Lil was right. You're a bad, naughty baby. You're never going to get any better. I'm through being your big brother. I don't want my responsibility no more." That moment just breaks my heart. And he throws the pocket watch, and it opens, and of course the picture of Tommy and Dill shows. And then he takes the banana food and he's ready to pour it on Dill so the monkeys will take him. And then there's just a moment where he stops and he looks down at his little brother, and baby Dill staring up at him with his big watery eyes. And we see Tommy's reflection in the water, and he stops and realizes what he's doing. And he puts down the food, and you just hear, for some reason, I just love it, you hear the little tap when he puts down the food. But then he cuddles with Dill, and he's saying, "I'm sorry, Dill. It's okay. Everything is going to be okay." Again, poor baby Dill clings to him because that's his big brother. He can't fend for himself, this little 4-week-old baby. And so it's a moment where Tommy realizes that even though Dill has been selfish up until this point, that this is his little brother, he has to take care of him. And it's so touching to me. But then back to Phil, Lil, and Chucky in another sweet moment when lightning strikes and a tree falls, and then we just see the huge tree bark land, and we see Phil's shoes roll away. And then Chucky says, "Phil, Lil," and then he sees Phil's shoes, and he just says, "Oh, Phil, he always loved climbing on trees. Now a tree's climbed on him." So heartbreaking. And then poor Lil takes the shoes, and she says, "He was my favoriteest brother." And then she starts crying, and then you just hear Phil, "Hey, you guys seen my shoes?" And Lil screaming, "Philip, I don't like this adventure anymore, Philip." And she's hugging him and she's crying. And Phil says, "Gosh, Chucky, this time we really are doomed." And so Lil just keeps saying, "Doomed, doomed, doomed." And then Phil slaps his shoes together and he says, "Slap out of it, Lillian. We gotta find the lizard." I like that moment that Phil kind of pops that bubble of emotion. It's cute. And Chucky says, "If we find the lizard and Tommy doesn't, how is he ever going to get home?" So because Chucky does still care about his best friend, of course, Chucky, pure of heart, but Phil says, "What are you worried about him for? He's the one who was going to let you get eaten by a fish." And Chucky says, "Yeah, well, somebody has to, don't they?" Chucky, so sweet. Oh my goodness. So then Tommy and Dill, it's calm now with them, and Tommy sings Dill a lullaby in the same tune as Dee Dee and Stu had earlier. And Tommy sings, "Baby, please rest your head. Soon we will be home in bed. Until then, I'll protect you like no other. You're okay for a little brother." And he kind of wipes his little nose, wipes his face. And Dill takes his hand and he says, "My Tommy." And Tommy holds his hand and he says, "My Dill." So sweet. Oh my goodness. And then Dill, in his first act of kindness, this little baby, because Dill loves his older brother, he takes the half of the blanket that ripped and he gives it to Tommy, and then they nap together and the storm clears. And so then after Dill and Tommy wake up, the monkeys are approaching again, but then Phil, Lil, and Chucky are back with the reptar wagon, and they fend off the monkeys. So they're to the rescue to save Tommy and Dill. And Tommy's so excited to see Phil and Lil. He screams, "Phil, Lil!" But then he stops and he says, "But what about?" And then Chucky rolls up in the Reptar wagon saying, "I am Reptar, the perfect children's toy." It is the perfect children's toy, honestly. It really is. I would have loved a Reptar wagon as a kid. They should have made those, for real. But anyway, Chucky takes the banana jar that was under the seat and he opens it and he says, "You want nanners, monkeys? Come and get it." And he goes running and Lil says, "Gosh, I never knowed he was so brave." And Phil says, "Yeah, I'm gonna miss him. Well, we better get in the wagon and get out of here." And Tommy says, "No, you guys take Dill and go look for the lizard. I gotta help my bestest friend." And he takes his sponsibility and he walks around in a circle for a second before going off. But then, as Chucky's running, that's when Angelica crashes into Chucky. She says, "Hey, where's Cynthia?" And Chucky just says, "Run, Angelica, the monkeys is coming, the monkeys is coming." And the monkey, one of them had taken Cynthia during that witch doctor song scene. And then the one monkey drops Cynthia and Angelica's finally reunited with Cynthia, but then the monkey takes it again. And that's when she grabs the monkey's tail and she's getting dragged again with her one roller skate on. But Chucky runs all the way up to an edge with the river down below, and he throws the banana food, but then unfortunately with the wind it blows on him and it lands on him. And the monkeys are closing in on Chucky, but then Tommy runs up with Spike because Spike found Tommy, and it's a cute moment when they reunite and Tommy just says, "Spike, you found me." It's so cute. And then Tommy pulls Chucky up and he opens up his sponsibility and we see that it's 5 o'clock now and he's looking around thinking, pretending like it's a compass, and he points and saying, "Oh, it's the lizard's house. Let's find the others. We got a lizard to see." And so then as they're running, they bang into a branch and Spike just keeps running, but then they come back with the Reptar wagon and Dill finally helps this time when he pulls the lever. The babies are able to jump in because Dill was sitting there on the Reptar wagon, so then they're all like cheering like, "Yay, thank you, Dilly." And Lil says, "You're my hero." And she gives Dill a kiss on the head. It's just so cute. And then Angelica finally gets Cynthia back when she bites the monkey's tail, and she finally gets her Cynthia doll back. And then she runs up and jumps in the wagon and she says, "Hey, you stupid diaper bags, wait for me." So then she's in the wagon with them and they're going down a bridge. And she says, "After all I've done for you babies, you were going to leave me and Cynthia behind?" And she goes flying up. And Phil says, "I didn't know she could fly." And Lil says, "I think it's because she's a witch." I love that line. I remember that in the trailer for sure. That's a funny one. Then she crashes and her other skate falls off. So she's dangling on this bridge. Basically, she could fall into the river at any moment. And then as that's happening, back to that relentless news anchor, he's in the helicopter again, and he says, "A truckload of babies and their pet horse lost in the woods." Idiot. But then Stu, in his Dactar, he crashes into them, and then their helicopter goes crashing into the woods, and he wrecks. The news anchor says, "I never won an Emmy," and they crash. And Stu just says, "Oops." But then he keeps going on as the Dactar is falling apart more and more, and he says, "I'm coming, Tommy. I'm coming, Dill." And I liked how he said Tommy first. Just a small thing, but I liked that because firstborn and secondborn just makes sense. And Tommy was worried about how his parents would forget him, but of course not. They love him. It's a matter of, that's something kids need to learn, that even though it's a new baby, your parents doesn't mean you're forgotten. That's all part of growing up. But then they pull Angelica up, and then the monkeys are running toward them, and Chucky says, "Don't let them take me," and Angelica says, "Don't let them take Cynthia." But then the monkeys run off because then the wolf is there, and Spike just attacks this wolf because he's got to protect his babies. Spike, the brave doggy. And there's a cute moment where Dill just jumps up excited. He screams, "Spike, Spike!" So cute, because obviously he doesn't talk much, even from the perspective of the babies. He has a few words here and there, but as Spike's trying to fight this wolf, he bites the wolf's tail and he's dangling, and the wolf's dragging its claws, and they both fall into the river. And then all the poor babies break, thinking Spike's a goner. And Angelica, this whole time, making it seem like she didn't really like Spike, that he was just this dumb dog, but she's crying harder than any of them, and she just says, dumb dog, and she's just heartbroken. They're all heartbroken. But then with Stu flying, he spots them on the bridge, and he screams, Deed, I found them, they're over by the ranger station, I'm going in, and he crashes. And when he gets up, the beautiful alignment, as with many episodes of Rugrats, where it seems like this actual mystical thing where it's the lizard, but really it's Stu with his Dactar contraption falling apart more and more, and he's moaning, and the lights are blinking, so it looks like his eyes are blinking. And to them, it's the lizard. And so Tommy walks up to the lizard, and at that point he's holding Spike's collar. And another moment that absolutely gets me every time. He says, Please, Mr. Lizard, we wish we could go. And he falters for a moment, and he looks back, and all the babies are staring with tears in their eyes. They're absolutely devastated, and he knows what he has to do. It's the truly selfless thing. He says what they all really want in that moment. He says, We wish we had our doggy back. And in that moment, again, beautiful, serendipitous, wonderful timing that just works out, the wonder of childhood, but the reality, the bridge crashes, and then we just hear barking. So there's Stu down there, and with Spike barking, and he's alive, and it's all wonderful and happy. Spike's okay, he's back. Tommy's wish came true. And then the beautiful, truly rewarding moment when the parents reunite with the kids. And then a great Charlotte Pickles moment. Charlotte, Angelica's mom. In the show, she's always talking on her cell phone, businesswoman. But then, and in this movie as well, but then when her phone rings, she looks at her phone and she just throws it over the bridge. So then finally, when Stu comes up, because Pop pulls him up and he says, You've got the pickle spirit, son. Maybe not the brains, but the spirit. And Dee Dee says, Stu, you did it. You found our boys. And the pocket watch drops. Stu picks it up. He looks at the picture, and then he moves it down, and we see Tommy and Dill hugging. And he says, Yeah, I guess I did. And then the ringleaders reunite with their monkeys, and one of them kisses the monkey on the lips at one point. And then, of course, the news anchor has to finish his story. He's all beaten up at this point. He pushes another news anchor out of the way, and he just says, This is my story. And he says, I'm Rex Pester, stay tuned. And then when Dill, he's drinking a bottle. They got a bottle somehow. But anyway, Dill is drinking a bottle, and then he finally shares it with Tommy. So he learned how to share, finally. And so then again, at the end, a voiceover with Chucky, and he says, And that was our big adventure. The monkeys founded their daddies, and we all got to go home and have fried bologna sandwiches. Except Dill, 'cause he got no teeth. But if you think things went back to the way they was before, you're wrong. 'Cause now, thanks to Baby Dill, they was even better. Because now it was back with the Indiana Jones reference when they were trying to get that golden monkey, that hot fudge sundae in reality. And then they were able to get it because little Dilly was able to reach it at the top, and he grabbed it. And then they all cheer, Yay, way to go, Dilly! And then we have the credits with the song Take Me There. And then there's a little post-credits scene where Grandpa Lou, Pop, he's just rolling down the streets, and the goat is chasing after him, where he was in the Reptar wagon. It's just a silly little thing that ends the movie. So it's a fun movie because it's the Rugrats. You gotta love those little babies. So I look forward to talking about Rugrats again. I will be talking about the show itself at some point. But for now, I just have to say I absolutely love Rugrats. Can't say that enough. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at StorytellSaga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, I'm excited to announce that I will be welcoming my first guest on the show. I'll be interviewing showrunner Jerry Persigian. I know Jerry from taking a writing course with him at the Jacob Kruger studio, so I'm very excited to be talking to him. He has a lot of experience writing on many hit shows, so I'm looking forward to that. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.